Life in a Late Woodland Native American Indian Village in Michigan, Part 5. In this series, I've used W.B. Hinsdale's book, Primitive Man in Michigan, quite a bit because, well, it was published in the 1930s, and a lot of it is dated material, definitely, but there's a lot of good basic material in there, too. And I'm going to use him again in this video, and I'm going to, as I did in the last one, I'll stop and give comments along the way based on my own experience in the field over the last 30 years. I'm not an expert, a professional archaeologist by any means, but I have learned a great deal from actually being out there in the field and working to discover the ancient prehistoric past of Northeast Michigan in particular. In what I want to discuss with you today in this chapter are workshops. And we looked some at occupations of the Late Woodland Native American Indians, but I want to look particularly at the workshops where the flint was knapped and formed into tools. And as we already discussed, in Indian culture, prehistoric Indian culture, Late Woodland being no different, that the roles that the men and the women played were quite segregated, if you will. Each had their own specific roles in society, worked well that way. And the male role primarily was hunting and gathering and fishing, and the production of tools, defending the village and the family. Well, the workshop then was a very important place for the male member of the Late Woodland Village. And I'm going to start here with what W.B. Hinsdale had to say, and then I'll go off on my own little tirade in a minute. A workshop is easily recognized. It is a place where flinty spalls, flakes, rejects, and broken stone implements are found in great abundance within a small space. Chippers, hand hammers, and anvils are generally interspersed among the debris. More than likely, at such a place, some ancient arrow maker did his work. Often, the crude material upon which he operated was brought from a distant place. Again, in localities where the material existed naturally in the rock or soil, chipping was done close by. Blanks were frequently roughed out into leaf-shaped pieces at the source of the supply, and then taken home to be retouched into the desired finished shapes. Caches or hoards of such blanks are not infrequent and are described in another paragraph. Arrow and spearheads that appear to be made of imported material are common on Michigan sites. Ohio flint is well distributed throughout the state. Obsidian, which is volcanic glass, does not exist in the natural state this side of the Rocky Mountains. But it found its way here and beyond. Native flinty stone suitable for chipping is abundant in places, but most of it is not of a real fine quality. And I guess I would stop there and say a couple things. There is a lot of flint in Michigan, our chert. And there is a lot of Bayport nodular chert and Bayport tabular chert. And while it is true that some of it is not of a superior high quality, some of it is of a very fine quality. Yes, it doesn't have the spectacular colors that some of the cherts from various parts of the country have. It nonetheless produced very fine arrowheads and spear points and knives. So anyways, let's continue with what Mr. Hinsdale was explaining to us. Occasionally, a choice piece of float material was found and made into some desired object. Without doubt, a large number of ready-made implements were imported. We cannot decide always whether those of non-native stuff were brought in as found or were brought in the rough. Here is opportunity for fine distinction. If a piece is of a kind of workmanship not usual in the district, it is probably a foreign product. If the design is common and the tooling not unusual, it may have been made from blanks or the natural stones that were transported from faraway places. The cherts and flints of the state are generally drab of color, and this is true. They are rather coarse-grained. This is not true. and often contain fossils, blemishes, and flaws, which is true. Although a few beautifully banded or striated shirts with a play of colors are to be found. Along the Kaukalan River in Bay County, there were numbers of workshops where whole nodules, fragments in all stages of reduction, and finished specimens were abundant. The natural nodules found upon the Kaukalan workshops and those of the Saginaw were probably transported from the shores of Saginaw Bay and from as far east as the headwaters of the Cass. Near Base Lake in Washtenaw County, workshops present two types of material for chipping. Upon one of them, the spalls and rejects are of excellent quality flint. Not 50 rods away from that shop was another where both material and workmanship were of very crude character. Interrupt again. That should not really be a surprise, at least with the distinction between quality pieces and crude pieces being made within a short distance of each other. I mean, like maybe a stone's throw, because each person was distinct and individual and had their own talents. I have found some incredibly beautiful worked stone knives and arrowheads, and then some that were really just, excuse me, crappy. But they did the purpose. They suited the purpose. But anyways, continue. The shops were probably the places where two operators, each using a different kind of material from the other, and one more skillful than the other, worked at different times. The place where the cruder work was done, one might conjecture, was the older, especially if the corroborative testimony of other differences could be discovered. And that could be true, but not necessarily so. Fine-grained, gritty gray stone, similar to felsite, but softer, was in general used for implements, and some elegantly wrought spears of it are in collections. Now, this goes to show that a skillful flaker did not always exert his best efforts upon only choice materials. Stones from which axes and celts were made are very abundant along the banks and streams and lakes, and hard water-worn pieces of igneous rock suitable for making axes are plentiful over the surface of the ground. An axe has been made as an experiment in 45 minutes, and a grooved polished specimen of such material as granite in 1.5 hours by a white man employing only the stone tools and methods of the Indian axe maker. Mr. Charles E. Brown says, in changing his place of residence from one campsite to another, it was probably often more convenient for the Indian to leave his axe and other heavier stone implements behind and to make others when he arrived at his destination than to carry them with him. On the other hand, stone axes of a good quality appear to have been often cherished items by their owners. I kind of wonder sometimes about that when I'd find a piece that was, really beautiful or spectacular. And I found a celt, which is an ungrooved axe, and it was absolutely beautiful. There was not a flaw, and perfect design, sharp bit edge, and it was halfway down a bank at Old Vanetton Creek, and it was buried probably about 12 inches down. And I always wondered, why? Because did he just lose it, or did he leave it? Was it easier for him to come back to it later? Such might be the case. At Old Vanetton Creek in Oscoda, and also the Goodwin Gresham site in Oscoda, we see two different occupations during the late woodland occupation period. And this is where I feel that I have a better idea of what was going on in the Oscoda area at these particular sites than the professional comes in, because the professional archaeologists who do a wonderful job with what they do, but they use a technique called site sampling. When they came into the Goodwin Gresham site years ago, which was just a stone's throw from Old Vanetton Creek, site sampling showed it to be a middle woodland, sparsely occupied camp. And they based this on 2 or 3 small site samplings. Actually, Goodwin Gresham was a huge site, really, where stone tools were produced. It was a male work site. Thousands and thousands of flakes and thousands of arrowheads and things have come off from that site over the years. All male-produced items. Whereas if you go over to Old Benetton Creek, which again is maybe a couple blocks away by our measurement of things. This is a village site, and it was the woman's site where the woman took care of things. And there, my ex-wife and I and my son Dennis and my daughter Charlene found the remains of over 1,500 pottery vessels based on the rim shards alone, most of which are hopefully still in the collection of the Oscoda Sable Historical Society. Site sampling does not work. There would never be a record of the extensive late woodland occupation at Goodwin Gresham if we were just to take the word of the professionals that had gone in there. So one other thing sticks in my mind that I want to tell you about workshops, because this was really interesting, and this took place at Goodwin Gresham as I was doing, my goodness, probably about 25 years ago now. I was very carefully excavating a small site which had hundreds and hundreds of sharp flint flakes in there that I actually, lacerated my hands on. But as I cleared it gently away, you could actually see the outline of a person that had been sitting there. You could see the outline of the backside and the legs, where the legs crossed and everything, because the chips didn't fall there. Let the chips fall where they may. But anyways, that's about it for this chapter, or this installment, and hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one soon.